Hey everyone, I'm Duraj Goel, the founder of Get Fresh Ventures, where we help growth stage companies build the systems that take them from traction to scale. Growth by design for founders and mid-career professionals, building companies and lives that scale with intention. Today, I'm excited to hear from someone who's spent 4 decades redesigning how companies think about building their human engines, hiring top performance. Lou Adler, CEO of founder of performance-based hiring learning systems, known globally as the Lou Adler Group. Lou has trained over 50,000 recruiters and hiring managers across Fortune 500 giants like Disney, LinkedIn, McKinsey, and Stryker. He's the engineer turned recruiter disruptor who built the performance-based hiring system, methodology that replaces skill and experience checklists with measurable business outcomes. He's taken a background in missile guidance engineering, finance, and operations and applied it to human capital. A Moneyball approach that treats hiring as a precision system, not a gut instinct. Your path went from guiding missiles at Hughes Aircraft to guiding hiring strategies for every major industry. For anyone who hasn't followed your journey, give us a short version. How does an engineer end up in hiring and redefining the way the world hires?
Well, that's actually a long story because it did happen. My first job was in 1968. I was an engineer. It was Vietnam. I did work on a nuclear guidance project. Got an MBA and started working on projects and contracts. And then I got moved to Detroit and set up a capital budgeting program for a big automotive company. Then I moved back to California and became director of financial planning at the corporate headquarters of a couple of big companies. Then I decided I'd want to run a division. So I went in and took over a job as vice president of logistics. And then I said I want to be the president, and I got that job, and I was 30. And I just kept on asking for these jobs, and which turned out pretty interesting because when you're really not competent to do something and you ask people if you can, they think you're going to fail. And if you do fail, nobody holds it against you. You get credit for trying. So I thought that was a pretty cool situation. But then in 1976, 77, I was working 80 hours a week, had a 4-year-old son, and I saw these recruiters who were making a lot more money than I was and working half the time. So I said, maybe I should become a recruiter. So I hated the group president, did become a recruiter. And I realized it was a business process for hiring. It was not dramatically different than making missiles and making axles and making calculators, all those businesses I was in. It's just different words, but it was a business process. So we created a search company, and it actually became a pretty successful search firm. Then I tried to automate it. And this has been the dot-com boom. Your host is on how to scale. I was going to say, no, this is how you don't do it. But at that time, I did raise money, which would be equivalent to about $10 million in today's dollars. And the dot-com boom came, and we lost it all. And then I said I was too old at the time, and I said, no, I can't do this again. I'm going to just create a little small training company. That's what we did.
How old were you then?
I'm 80 now, so I was 55 then. So I looked at it and said, nah, I don't want to go through this again. Lost a lot of money, lost friends, but it could have worked. And now with AI, I know it can work. So if I was younger, I know I could raise 30 to 50 million and pull it off again, but I'm not younger. And it's hard work scaling and building a company. And when you take money from somebody, you got to deliver. It's not, you can't be proud of taking $50 million. You now have to earn that right to do it. So it might sound good on a pat in the back until you're dealing in those monthly or quarterly board review meetings, and they dive into you, every mistake you've made and your sleepless nights for weeks. So, but I'm happy to talk about a journey that took a detour, and I've hired a lot of people to raise money, and it's a tough challenge, but it's a worthy challenge if you're up for it.
So you went up the ranks of corporate, and it's the wisdom now that, or at least the perceived wisdom is that if you've got an idea and you're coming out of school, you should just go build it versus going down the path of a career and learning and then getting to the point where then you understand the problem enough that you can build a company. What are your thoughts on taking that career route versus the startup route?
I don't want to be glib. So if you asked me 20 years ago, I would say, no. You got to go to corporate and see what it's like. How do you run multi-divisions? How do you manage cost controls? And how do you do all these? How do you build and manage teams? And I would have said that's the right way to do it. I'm not so sure that's the right way to do it because I've seen younger people get $5, $10, $20 million and build companies out of it. And they kind of stumble through it but they're successful. So that's why I say I'm not positive the idea that I have. And you look at Zuckerberg, I mean, remarkable guy. How could he do that? It would make no sense in my viewpoint of the world how somebody could create a company like Facebook or like Meta and be successful at it. So I don't know that my journey is the correct journey. I think if I have to go down to first principles, I think there are some ideas that are relevant to everybody. You've got to understand business. You got to understand how all the pieces come together. You have to understand technology. You have to understand marketing, and you got to understand how to build people and grow. So I think there are some lessons I can provide, but I don't think I'm actually a great source of that as I ponder where some people are very successful, and I wouldn't have expected that. So, but nonetheless, I can talk about some of the components of it and give some advice, but I'm not 100% sure it's the only good advice that one would get.
Well, that's refreshing in itself. My career has ebbed and flowed between the startup worlds. I started back in '93 when I was 13 years old with my dad as my first business, and then went through the dot-com boom and bust. Somehow managed to build a learning management platform from '99 to 2006, exited for 180 million. We had to build on the lean. I only recently learned I have ADHD, but I've had a systems mind my whole life. My dad was an engineer at Texas Instruments building ICs, and I've been an engineer my whole life. And I take a very systems matter approach. And funny enough, I left my career after doing 80-hour weeks 3 months before my firstborn because I thought to myself, I can't do this anymore. I got to find leverage. With all the systems I built to date, I needed to figure out how to build a system in my life. So it's actually a hard question for me to answer as well. Startup or corporate? Because there's so much compression that happens in getting so much less work and a significant compression of what you need to do to get to a company that you can start to build and scale. But when you were going down that path of moving from this engineering mindset, going to finance and corporate and going up that world to then coming up with a performance engineering system, what was really that transition? Like, what did you start to see that was consistent, that you felt needed to be codified?
Well, I think what you said was interesting because our backgrounds are somewhat similar, it seems like, as a systems engineer. Now, I was a pretty good engineer. And when that first job I took I was 22 years old. I got a job offer in California. I was upstate New York. And it was Vietnam, and I knew didn't want to, well, I would have gone in, but I didn't really want to. So I get a call from somebody in Southern California. It was a systems engineer working on a nuclear missile project. And I took it because I was in California and I listened to the Beach Boys
Mm-hmm.
and they said, California girls. Okay, I could go to California girls. So I wanted to do that. And it worked out. I did find a California girl, still married. But the point being is when I took that job and the head said, oh, you're a mechanical engineer, not a
Mm-hmm.
electrical engineer. And I said, yeah, but I'm a systems engineer. He said, yeah, but you're not really a systems engineer. Well, I can do it. So he said, okay, well, nothing we can do about it. You're here. So I was assigned a job to look at a nuclear missile, and which had 30 or 40 parts. It was a Minuteman missile, had a gyroscope and 20. And he said, you got to figure out when to blow it up when it's off course. It took me about 6 months to figure it out. And none of the other engineers who had W's could do it. I learned something then at that moment. I said, you don't have to be perfect. You have to kind of think like a systems engineer, how all the pieces come together. And I think that's what you kind of said, Daraj, is that when you see so maybe that's the secret sauce of being an entrepreneur. You have to see how the pieces come together, the product piece, the marketing piece, the sales piece, the component, the distribution piece. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's the secret sauce of how entrepreneurs do it. Now, in my career, I've worked with dozens, maybe hundreds, and I don't want to go 100, but it's certainly 50 to 150 entrepreneurs who were either members of YPO, Young Presidents Organization, or Vistage. And I work with them. They were my clients when I was a recruiter. And I could see
Mm-hmm.
some of them were very, very, very successful. Some of them raised money. I would put people into their companies. But some
Mm-hmm.
of them plateaued I don't want to say pretty quickly, but there was a limit where people just couldn't get past a certain size. And there was another limit where people could keep on accelerating and growing. And so now that you mention it, that to me was the tipping point. When you were so technical and narrow focused, inward focused, they failed. When they were outward focused on, hey, look at the whole business operation, they were successful. So getting through that pivot point of a small company to big company, and there was a few entrepreneurs who had that interior mindset, were smart enough to know they couldn't do it alone. Maybe that's where Zuckerberg hired, and I can't remember her name, the woman who was his chief operating
Sheryl
officer.
Sandberg.
Yeah. So maybe that was the tipping point that I could see. So my point of view was outside it as opposed to inside it. But I saw it. I mean, I literally, and some of my friends made big bucks, and they're still my friends today. But some of the people I took money from when I did the .com aren't my friends anymore. But that's a totally different issue because once you take money, it's there.
Yeah.
You gotta deliver. And in the .com, we had an idea that I knew could work, but it didn't work.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because after over a decade of low interest rates, founders started going to market with pitch decks instead of sales decks to raise money first. And it's something that we see a lot of times as well with founders who raise funds and then struggle to deliver. And in the approach that I look at businesses, they're run by two distinct components: the human engine and the business engine. The humans are the ones that work together to drive growth. They're the ones that run the go-to-market, end-to-end product systems, like you just said. And then the business engine, which is really just GTM ops. It's all the functions. If you can operationalize and have it all connected, then you've got one living, breathing organism that you can turn the dial. And as a founder, the more predictable that is, the more capable it is, the more you can look forward, like you're an F1 car race driver that you can drive down the road and hit the pedal, the engine's going to work, versus someone who spends too much time on the engine and doesn't go anywhere, or someone who can't trust that engine to perform. I think the philosophy is somewhat similar, but how, after spending all these years in the recruitment side and looking at human performance, how does that translate for you when in terms of scale? The founder who can look outward still needs the human engine to perform.
Well, let me kind of take it sideways, but directly relate to you. So as a engineering nerdy guy, I looked at
Hmm.
organizational structure the way you just said, but I kind
Hmm.
of changed the words. I said, okay, let's look at an organization and break into two components: running the company and growing the company. And running the company includes operations, logistics, distribution, engineering, accounting, even finance, the stuff that you run the company. Growing the company includes sales, product development, the creative strategy side. And I suspect, but don't know, that a lot, and so let me kind of, I take it, people who are good at running the company, building that infrastructure, tend to have difficulty in handling the growing the company. On the other hand, there's people who are more entrepreneurial, who can grow the company and build a team, can hire the people who can run the companies. And I don't want to totally conclude that's the truth, but that seems to be a key component of it, which is what you've talked about: running the company and growing the company. And I think, I've just seen so many use cases where that idea of, hey, if you're operationally focused, you can't grow a company, is fundamentally wrong. So that's why I don't want to really conclude that that's the only way to do it. I think there are people who
Well, I
see
think
the whole picture and have an opportunity and can grow at scale.
the funny thing is, throughout my career, I was the head of operations. My job was to give the founder breathing room so that they could focus on working on the company, while I focused on making sure the in worked. As an entrepreneur, my greatest challenge is leverage in what I can do personally versus what the team can do, and how we can work in sync. Um, when founders are hiring, how do they engineer this type of performance into their model? Like, what's kind of thinking that they can take? And I suspect a lot of what you consult and advise companies on is based on how to hire.
Well, let me kind of take it, and I'll give you a story so you'll get a sense of this.
Okay.
What we're really good at is defining work. So as a recruiter, I became really good at understanding work. So I'm going to go back about 25, 30 years. It was and it was before the dot-com boom, but I was brought into one client who was looking for a VP marketing. Company was about 75, 80 million. They had an opportunity to double or triple. And I knew the chairman of the board. He was a former client of mine. He said, Lou, you got to come in. Lee, who's the CEO, wants to hire a VP marketing, and he's
Hmm.
going all about it all wrong. So this answers your question. So I met this guy, Lee, and he said, "What are you doing here? I don't want to, you don't know anything about the internet, about hiring people. Why did Howard want to see you? You haven't ever done it. I need an MBA from Stanford. I need a double E. Got to be from Caltech or Stanford. This is very complicated. Have you ever done that?" So literally for 30 minutes, he was berating me. So I just, after I finally got a word in edgewise, I just said, "Okay, Lee, you're hiring a VP marketing. Whether it's me or someone else doing it, doesn't matter. The person is exceptional. Over the course of the year, what would this person have done where you feel you can give
Hmm.
the person a big bonus and more shares? Top-notch person." So he says, "Lou, you finally asked a decent question." Of course, I didn't ask any questions,
Hmm.
but he finally said you did. So he said, "I got to have this person build a 3-year product roadmap. We've got 80 engineers.
Hmm.
I can't add more than 10 or 20. And I've got it. This person's
Hmm.
got to know exactly what's happening in the internet, what the competition's doing, what Cisco's doing, so we can navigate our way through the product and really double our size." So I just said, "Okay, Lee, if I could find someone who could build that 3-year product roadmap and build it out and lay it out and do everything you need, would you at least see that person from me? Even if," and I said, "They probably have to have a double E degree." I agree with that. Not sure where it has to be
Hmm.
from. And I don't know if they need the Stanford kind of stuff, but they've got to be able to build that 3-year product roadmap. Would you at least see a person from me? He said, "Absolutely. I just told you that." That's not what he just said. But in all the years I've been a recruiter, I have never defined the work as a series of skills, experience, and competencies. I
It's
always
always
ask the
outcomes.
person, what does this person need to do to be successful? And every single job in the world, from a call center at Yellow Pages or insurance companies or chairman of the board of big publicly traded companies, it's always 5 or 6 key performance objectives that define the work. And the idea is, if you can prove the person can do the work, they obviously have the skills and experiences needed, because it's the work that determines the skills. You can have all the skills and experience and not be, number one, not be competent to do the work in that environment, or not want to do the work. So the idea is define the work before you define the person doing the work. And that will be a game changer for every single entrepreneur listening to your podcast.
Yeah, I think that's the soundbite, Lou.
That's better than the soundbite. That
Yeah.
is the Golden Cross or something, the North
Yeah.
Star. I don't
Yeah.
know, something like that.
It's a key piece of, so with my engineering mindset, I tried to codify all my years of building and wrote out an accelerator and launched a couple of unicorns out of it. And it really comes down to being clear about where you're headed and making sure people want to get there as much as are willing to gain the skills or have the skills to achieve that outcome. Um, how do you tackle that desire of achieving the outcome, not just the outcome itself?
Well, I don't, if you're talking about, so let me just take that concept and bring it to an entrepreneur. You've got a business idea. That's got a
Hmm.
strategy and plan. You can build that into, okay, what do I have to accomplish? If I want to raise, let's say I've raised $10 million and I want to grow market share from X to Y. That's what you want to do over the next course of the year. Well, what are the key steps you have to do underneath that? What are the marketing steps? What are the product steps? What are the distribution steps? What are the channel, whatever the components are? Now you got to find people who, number one, are motivated and competent to do that work. Number one, to work to tie us to the business strategy, and the person feels committed to that job. So now you've got
Hmm.
all the pieces interconnected. You've taken your business process, your business objectives, and tied it to each of the individual jobs. I actually created a model that did actually that. It was pretty cool, but I was more interested in building the model than finding it. But the whole purpose was I would map out a company's organization by taking their business strategy, breaking that down by function, and then showing it by people. And then, as part of a recruiter, we start interviewing all the people in the individual jobs. And I could rank the candidates or the current employees against those jobs. And we created a map that said, okay, your VP marketing is going to be the killer. He's not going to make it. Your operations person's strong. Your accounting is adequate, but you should upgrade it. So the whole point was I created this map of how a company should hire people, and it worked. And I got, the map was only a way to get the search projects. It was pretty cool, I have to say. It was a good marketing. We got so many YPO clients that way. Literally, I got so many YPO clients. as a result of that. We called it network mapping. Maybe that wasn't the call of it, but made a lot of placements at YPO with using that network mapping process.
I'm learning so much, Lou, and I always appreciate learning from another systems mind. Well, I'm conscious of time, and I think you shared so much wonderful information already. I want to thank you for joining us on our podcast and sharing your business and your journey. What would you leave founders with in terms of a point to consider, especially as they're building their companies? Whether it's a mid-career founder as he's scaling from 5 to 10, or the founder going from 50 to 100, as they're trying to think through people in this new version of reality where AI is promising to replace people.
Well, I'm going to go back to maybe 1972. It was a year after I got my MBA. I was at headquarters of Rockwell International as a financial analyst. Had to be within 8 or 9 months. My boss calls me and says, Lou, I want to make you senior financial analyst over at Rockwell Automotive. I'm becoming the VP controller. And I want you to come to Michigan from Southern California to go to Detroit. I said, Chuck, I ain't going to Detroit. I'm not going to Detroit. There's no way. I just got married. So next morning, Chuck literally puts me in a headlock. Literally, I'm 25 or 26. He's 28. He ultimately became the youngest CFO of a publicly traded company. But at that time, he was the VP controller. Literally puts me in a headlock and says, okay, Adler, I'll make you manager of capital budgeting. I'll raise your salary 35%. I'll buy you a house or help you buy a house. Call your wife up. You're now manager of capital budgeting for multi-billion-dollar automotive company. Call up my wife, Lorraine, we're going to Michigan. So now I'm in Michigan 3 months later, and I get this call from Chuck. So this will be your answer. So Chuck was this guy's name. And it was about 11 o'clock in the morning, and I was working on a project. And he says, Lou, I'm over at the University of Michigan. I need you over here. We're interviewing 20 MBA students, and I need you here because I only can interview 8 of them. So you got to be here. We're going to be here. And you got to be here by lunchtime, which is an hour away. And we're going to be here all day doing this. I said, Chuck, I can't get there. We got to report to the president and CFO tomorrow. He said, get your butt over here. There's nothing more important than hiring great people. Nothing. We'll figure out how to get the report done. That stuck in my mind. There is nothing more important than hiring great people. Nothing. Went over there, interviewed the candidates, stayed for dinner. We invited 8 for dinner. Probably got back to the office at maybe 11 o'clock. Didn't leave until 4 o'clock in the morning. Got back at 8 o'clock. Got this handwritten presentation to the VP Finance and the CEO, who ultimately became the chairman of Bendix Corporation. And the chairman looked at us, and his name was Bill. He said, Bill, to Chuck, he said, why is this a handwritten report? Chuck said, we were over at the University of Michigan hiring MBAs, and we didn't have time. We stayed there till 8 o'clock at night. We made 6 offers yesterday. And I told Lou there's nothing more important than hiring great people. So I'm sorry it wasn't a typewritten report. The president looked at me and said, you're 100% right. There's nothing more important than hiring great people. Every one of those candidates we placed in that job became a VP or a president of a major corporation. There's nothing more important than hiring great people. Nothing. Everything else can wait. That to me is the lesson. And begin with the end in mind. Define the work you want done. Find people motivated to do that work. That's the game changer.
On that bombshell, I think we can thank you very much for sharing your thinking. I completely agree. I appreciate the insights, and just personally, I would love to catch up and chat more.